I think we should get started. Hello, everybody. This is Susanne Rinner. I'm the current AATG president. And with me are Doug Philipp.
Hi there, everybody.
And Keith Cathcart.
Hi.
So thank you very much for everybody who's joining us live. And as I just said, we'll also be posting this webinar on the website. And our goal here is to provide some information on submitting a successful ACTFL proposal, and certainly we welcome questions and comments, and maybe you also have some other tips and tricks to share at the end. We prepared a few slides that Doug and I will walk through, and we hope to finish up within half an hour or so. So let's get started. We have a brief overview of what we're going to talk about. So if we can move the slides now, I don't know, Keith, if you gave me permission to do that or if you're going to do that.
I'm going to go ahead and do it because transitioning, you would have to reload the slides.
Okay, that's fine. So as I said, we want to talk about how to develop a successful ACTFL proposal. We have a sample proposal. We would like to provide some information about logistics and policies, and in the end, some helpful hints. So our first piece of information is read all the instructions, and the instructions are posted, of course, on the ACTFL website, and you don't even have to be in the process of submitting a proposal. You can just follow this link, and there are two sets of instructions: one, how to submit an ACTFL proposal, and then there is another PDF file that has information for presenters. And you can also go to our AATG website, and you will find not only information about sessions that have already been formed in the sense that they are looking for presenters for specific topics, but you will also find some general information about how to submit a proposal through the ACTFL website. Doug, is there anything you want to add at this point?
I was just going to also say, read the instructions, also follow them. Follow each point on all the instructions. We'll get into all that stuff, but that's very, very vital to help proposals be accepted. So read the instructions, follow them.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So let's go to our next slide where we actually talk about submitting ACTFL proposals. So first of all, complete all required fields. That's very important simply because of how the blind peer review is conducted. If there is a field that's empty, then you will automatically assigned 0 points for that particular field. Also keep in mind proposals need to be written in English, and you can see here the lists of components for proposals. There are 11. That looks more daunting than it is. And for each of these fields, there is a specific requirement. For example, the title, I think, is 75 characters.
Mm-hmm.
You need to pick a presentation type, you need to select the applicable language, and you need to select the language of presentation. Name of the presenters, then there is a keyword list, and you will select one keyword for which a category for which your proposal is best suited. You'll also select the audience level, and again, that is simply a drop-down menu. Now, the real meat, I would say, in the proposal is the program guide description, which is the text that you will see in the ACTFL program. Then the content and purpose of the session, which is for purposes of submitting the proposal. This will not be in the program. Neither will outcomes and strategies for engaging the audience, but those 3, 9, 10, and 11 are actually where you can shine and where you should really pay most attention to in the sense of crafting a successful proposal. And we will show these items to you in a successful sample proposal from last year. Doug, is there anything that you want to add at this point?
Sure. One point that I'll say is very, very important. Each of the different things, for example, the title, and then down on 8, and especially on 8, they have specific limits like 75 characters or 100 words. And each of those points is laid out in each of the fields as you actually click on them and get into the full application process. Follow those things very carefully. Please don't think, well, I've got 78 characters. That's close to 75. Or I've got 150 words. That's close to 100. That'll kick your proposal right out as well, out of the running to be considered fully.
Right, and thank you, Doug. And I actually think that you cannot submit your proposal unless you adhere to the specific length requirements in each of these text boxes.
Yeah.
So what I do personally is I pre-compose these longer parts in a separate Word document and check that I have the required length, and then I simply copy and paste. Keep in mind that special characters are not supported by the software. So you also always want to make sure that you give it one more read over once the text is in the text box itself. So to make it maybe a little more concrete, especially for people who haven't done the submission process, and what's, I think, actually what maybe to make it seem less intimidating, there is a final submit button. So you can do a lot of work, you can draft and redraft, and you can even save your proposal before you actually submit it. So that's really also, I think the interface works really well in the ACTFL portal. So we selected a sample proposal. That's certainly not the only way of submitting and crafting a proposal, but that's just one that was successful. So you see the title here, using the National German Exam to develop interpretive communication skills. And then the person who submitted this proposal chose the type of session. So that was a true session. As you know, there are different formats for sessions if you have been at ACTFL before, and we'll talk a little bit about that later about that as well. The applicable language here is, of course, German, because it is about the National German Exam, so I'm not sure how helpful it would be for anyone teaching another language. The language of presentation is English. Keywords chosen were assessment and feedback, and there are, I think they increased the number of keywords this year as far as I can tell, so there's quite a range to choose from. And audience level, grade 6 to 12, there are other choices in that drop-down menu. There's college and university, there's something more towards administrators, there's something that says for all levels. So again, I think there's something to choose from, a wide variety. Doug, did you want to add anything to these parts of the proposal?
I was just going to add, people have asked me in the past if it matters on the language of presentation, whether or not it's German or in English. It's fine. Either one is perfectly fine. So being in English doesn't give anybody a slight advantage. Being in German doesn't give anybody a slight advantage because ACTFL at the National Convention is trying to offer a broad spectrum of sessions. So that's fine. If they're all in German, it's fine as well, truthfully. If somebody feels like presenting in English, that's no problem.
Susanne, if I could just add one thing, it's very important that for the applicable language that you select German, because if you do not select German, then your proposal will not be reviewed by AATG's committee.
Yeah, thank you, Keith, for highlighting that. Exactly.
And if I can add to that, that means it goes into the big, big ACTFL pool, which they get several thousand submissions for that. So little difference there.
Right, and our ratio is a little. It's still competitive,
right.
But it's less, definitely less than the overall ACTFL submission pool. Now let's talk about the parts where you actually have to develop some text. So even though the only part of your proposal, as I said, that will end up in the program is the program guide description, I personally like to start with the first text block, which is content and purpose. And we have a text here. I'm not going to read it, but this is where you can where you also have a longer text that you can write, a slightly longer text. So focus on content and purpose. So what is the goal that you're trying to get at, and how are you going to show that? And that's where really your own work comes in my mind. Doug, do you have anything to add to that?
It's a really good idea to also key into, and it's on the very bottom line in this slide that we're looking at, the ACTFL World Readiness Standards, or the various ACTFL standards. That's not a bad thing to mention, that whatever session is being proposed ties into this specific ACTFL standard or standards, or various points that are listed by ACTFL and promoted by ACTFL, because we're in this all together, and that's just a level of professionalism.
We should also say that they do want you to depersonalize everything. So because it is a blind peer review, anything that could identify the presenters here is not allowed. So you need to kind of write it in a very general way. So if you want to write about work that you do in your program or department or at your school, you would need to write this so that not everybody's, to exclude the name of your particular institution where you're working. Let's go to proposal to the outcomes text box. In the outcomes text box, you're expected to very clearly describe what participants will gain, will learn, will be able to do at the end of your session. And this is where if you're familiar with the can-do statements that ACTFL has, this is where can-do statements come in, because they would like for you to complete this section as if they were can-do statements. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying, but maybe Doug, you can explain this more clearly.
No, that's perfectly fine. And everybody, if we remember perhaps back into teacher college days or something, the wording that you see, these 3 paragraphs here, participants will be able to, that's perfectly fine to use language like that. This is not a part where somebody has to be completely creative and come up with something, nobody's ever used this wording before, but rather it's fine. Participants will be able to do this, do this, do this. And it is really, really good to look closely at the can-do statements. They're available on the ACTFL webpage. And just look at what are you hoping to accomplish with your whole session, and can-do statements that match up with those things. That's a perfect way to do it.
Great. Thank you very much, Doug. Exactly. So let's look at strategies of engagement, which in a way are related in my mind to the outcomes. So they would like for you to briefly describe how the session will be conducted. So is it presentations with Q&A? Here, the presenter chose to engage the audience with 3 group activities. Will you do role play and model a session? I think you can be creative as long as you adhere to the expectations that you clearly describe what you as the presenter and what the audience will do, and how the purpose of the session leads to, in a way, what the audience will have learned or will have done throughout the session. And I think that's why I chose this example that is a little bit different than maybe what we normally do in sessions, because there was actually some activity going on among the audience in addition to a brief presentation. Doug, is there anything you want to add at this point?
Yes, I can add in. It is really good to, as you're thinking out what you want to do in a session and everything, to involve the audience, to have interactive things with the audience. That will probably increase the chances of a session moving up in terms of points if it's interactive, as opposed to the 2 or 3 presenters, whatever, will just present research that they have done, but rather interactive audience participation, good things to do.
Thanks, Doug. So now we come to the last text box where you can create text, where you need to create text. Again, this is a very limited space text box, and that's why I like to do this at the end, because now I've written the content and the purpose, I've thought about outcomes, I thought about how I'm going to present my material, and now I can focus on, okay, how would I like my session to appear in the program guide to make it look attractive, but also to make sure that it accurately describes what I'm planning to do in the session, because as you know, we have quite a few parallel sessions. Time is of the essence, and we want to make sure that our participants, the people at the conference, choose wisely as they decide which sessions to attend. So that's kind of, and I like to do this last because I can, as you know, it's a very condensed text, and I find it a little easier to write it at the end after I've written everything else. Doug, is there anything you want to add?
I'm going to say I do it the opposite way. I've done the program guide description first, and then I've had to go back and revise it entirely. That's just something that I sometimes start with that way. So I think the important message maybe to take away from this is to use a method that you're comfortable with, and to move back and forth between the various sections of the entire submission. Cleaning up various points, making sure, for example, if you look at the sample proposal here, introduces key features, national German exam, authentic root sources, questions, assess through various activities. Participants learn how, get the main idea, etc., like that. That's a nice summarization to all those longer things that each person has drafted and has written out in the past. So, yeah, I'll be honest, usually I do the program guide first, then I go back and re-wordsmith it as I go through everything. That's just how I do it.
Clearly, there's not one approach, but many. But in the end, we all, Doug and I and everybody who's presenting at ACTFL, we all read the instructions. And if we go to the next slide, we follow the instructions, and we need to please remember the overall submission deadline, and this is a hard deadline, and I would strongly encourage you to not wait till that last day, because I had emails from friends and colleagues who submitted at 12 midnight, and the proposal was not accepted for that reason. So, as I said, you can go onto the portal. You don't have to be an ACTFL member. You will have to be an ACTFL, or rather AATG member, hopefully, once your session has been accepted. So you will be able to submit without joining, but you you can prepare your submission way in advance, and you should also, in my mind, submit it earlier than the absolute deadline. And I noticed, I don't know if this is new, but I noticed it for the first time, that now there is a policy for presenters who cancel their session or who are a no-show. So please pay attention to that as well, and think about timing and logistics of the conference that you are thinking of attending. So I'd like to focus a little more on being a presenter. So if you read the instructions, if you read the policy on being a presenter, an individual may be a lead presenter on one proposal and may be listed as a secondary presenter on another. And at AATG, so that's the ACTFL piece, and AATG follows those policies. We don't allow anyone to present in more than 2 sessions. There might be some exceptions, but that's the overall policy. So, for example, sometimes executive council members might have more than 1 session because of their function as executive council members. But as I said, there's usually a reason for that. On the flip side of that is all AATG sessions must have more than 1 presenter, the rationale being that we want to allow many of our members to present. Doug, I'm pausing for a moment, is there anything you would like to add?
I was just going to tell everybody, I was on the selection committee back in 2012 when ACTFL was in Denver, and I can certainly assure you all the proposals are submitted blind. I remember reading proposals and not having a clue who was behind the written portions or anything like that. So sometimes people feel like certain people's always get accepted. No, there's nothing like that. Really what it is, it's just simply the sessions, the proposals have been well written, well developed. The topics are interesting. They're germane to current topics that are of interest to people. And those things, that's what really plays into the whole sessions moving on up in terms of points and everything. And for the AATG sessions having more than 1 presenter, yeah, it's just so that more people will get the chance to present. With the time slots being 45 minutes now, we might say maybe keep it down to definitely not more than 3 presenters, unless it's perhaps like a whole team of teachers presenting on one topic or something. And that's fine to do that if you all want to do it. So that's what I have to say on this portion.
Great. Thanks, Doug. So let's briefly just walk through a couple of things about the review process. Keith already mentioned, if you want your paper to be reviewed by colleagues in German, by AATG and ACTFL people, be sure to mark your submission as German. So that's where the applicable language comes in. That if you list that as German, then your session will be reviewed by AATG. And that, as we said, that has the advantage that the pool is still competitive, but it is a little smaller than the overall ACTFL pool of proposals. Please complete all parts of the submission, because leaving things blank, leaving any text box blank will disadvantage you. You can take a look at the scoring rubrics, which are posted in the ACTFL submission guidelines document, and as we said, it is a blind review, so it is not chosen by name of presenters, but rather how competitive and relevant the proposal is. And that's also one of the reasons why we just wanted to highlight with this webinar the different aspects of a successful proposal. And this is where we would like to make the suggestion, because it is so competitive and the number of German sessions is very limited, we'd like to encourage you to consider presenting your work as either an electronic poster or as a roundtable presentation. The electronic poster is an opportunity to share your research or project in a poster exhibit area. You can stand there during a 60-minute period and you show your work on your laptop computer. So this is one aspect that I don't think we as AATG members have fully utilized. The other presentation form, the roundtable presentation form, is 45 minutes in length. It gives you 45 minutes at a table with a group of 10 people. And so they suggest, for example, 30 minutes of presentation followed by 15 minutes of discussion and feedback. So it's the same length as a session. It's a little different in terms of how it works with the audience, but I think it is, again, a format that we haven't really used completely, and I think it's a little less competitive to add roundtable presentations because they can add many more roundtables in the space that they have available wherever they put these roundtable presentations. So my hope is that we get a few more roundtable and poster presentations for the next ACTFL. Doug, is there anything that you want to add at this point?
Just real quick, both of these things are really, really great for anybody who feels that maybe they have one idea or one project that could possibly be fairly involved, but they don't have enough to do a full session. This is a really great way for someone just to take the time to explain one little project that they're doing. Perhaps we'll just say a book that they have really worked up materials for and everything well in their classes, and they want to present that. This would be a perfect spot to do something like that.
Perfect. So last but not least, if you are new to ACTFL, we encourage you to contact colleagues who have presented at ACTFL. If you're new to the profession, you might contact your AATG chapter or the AATG office to connect you. And if you're a seasoned presenter at ACTFL, we also invite you to share your experiences and expertise, for example, at one of your AATG chapter meetings. And with that, we have a few minutes. We can answer a few questions or discuss a few items here. And otherwise, you're certainly more than welcome to email Doug or myself at the email numbers that we provide here. So are there any questions, any feedback, any concerns at this point that we can discuss? So how are the roundtable topics selected was one question. They are selected, they undergo the same blind peer review process as all the other proposals that are being submitted. The only difference is that you check the session format, you check roundtable presentation. I hope that answers the question.
I think one point real quick, and it follows up kind of on the roundtable topics. Way back at the very start of the whole proposal thing, there is a drop-down menu that says what type of presentation are you wanting to make. And it's session, electronic poster, roundtable, I think there might be another one or so. If you're not sure what it is or anything like that, you can always reach out to us or to the AATG staff at Cherry Hill, and we can all point you in a special direction. The question, is the pound symbol considered a special symbol? I would say yes, and umlauts are definitely, as is the est-set. Any of the diacritical marks for any language are considered special symbols, so they don't want those. They being ACTFL specifically.
I will tell you that if you put those in, our staff can decipher and make sure that things get fixed for the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Yeah, so I mean, as you notice, our program looks pretty nice typically. And you also, in that one PDF that you will find when you follow that ACTFL link that I post in the PowerPoint, you will see very detailed explanation of what's required and what's expected, etc. So what I typically do is I download the PDF and I read through the PDF before I get started with my proposal, just so that I refresh my memory what the expectations are, etc. I see we have one more question. Would there still be time to post a proposal on the AATG website in order to find a co-presenter? Keith, can I ask you to answer that question and to outline how that process works?
Absolutely. And just by submitting on the portal, and then probably just a good idea, because we're not necessarily checking that portal every day where you actually fill those in, to send a message to info@AATG, and we'll make sure that it gets added. We've already added a couple since the site went live on December 4th.
Great, thank you very much. Is there a preferred number of presenters for sessions such as 3? I want to propose a session with 2 presenters. Well, I think it's probably between 2 and 3. I obviously probably we would have a slight preference for 3, but certainly 2 makes sense too. Unless Keith and Doug, if you want to add something to that point.
The policy is simply more than 1. So I think that if it meets that guideline, then after that, all decisions are based on the quality of the submission and not the number of presenters in the session.
Okay, we have one. Well, I'm not saying last, but we will need to wrap it up because we wanted to create a webinar that is not too long. So Birgit, will this webinar be available? Yes, we will post the webinar, and I assume that AATG will also send a message to let us know. Okay, thank you, Keith. You're responding to that already. So unless there's anything urgent, I would say we shared the information that we wanted to share, which is remind everybody how to submit a successful proposal, share some additional resources, and last but not least, and please feel free to share with your colleagues who are considering to submit proposals, and encourage them to consider alternative formats, in particular the electronic poster and the roundtable presentation, to add to the number of sessions that we usually have in the ACTFL program. And I think that might be a real attractive option for many of you. So thank you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you to Doug and Keith.
Thank you.
And I wish everybody good luck, and I hope to see you in Washington, D.C. next year.
Thanks all. Bye-bye now.